for Equestria. Prologue. Here we see the weapons captured from the traitors who still followed the princesses, who brought the curse upon us that almost killed us all. This has once been a nice little town, but their actions destroyed it, as it did almost all of Equestria. One of the last military units that was under the command of a delusional mayor named Frostmane was actually defeated here by our glorious protectors. A mare explained as she guided a group of ponies through the war museum that had once been Ponyville. The griffins and changelings had built a big wall around the town, so that it would be a monument of their victory. Mystique and Candy Cane were two of the ponies who were following their guide. The dark purple mare could only snort when this mare called her a traitor. They had actually fought for the good of Equestria, and, while she had to admit that the griffins and changelings had gotten rid of the undead, she still saw Applepeel's reign for what it was. A mare that had no right to rule was now sitting on the throne in the new capital. A mare that the princesses had taken in after the apples had cast her out to give her a second chance. And how had she thanked them? By plotting behind their backs for years. Mystique's eyes fell on the ruins of a certain building. She had attended this tour many times in the years since the museum had been opened. There, in the second-floor window of a nice little house, was blood, and if she looked at it from a different angle, she could actually see the skeleton of one of her friends. Her sniper rifle still lay next to her. The first time she had seen this, she had almost snapped. Godspeed had the right to a funeral with all honors, not be on display to indoctrinate ponies to believe the bullshit their current rulers were spouting. Candy Cane looked over to a fenced area. In it stood the completely inactive Sparkle 1. And the griffins had made sure it wouldn't move anywhere without some major repairs. All important parts had been removed and were now on display in different parts of the museum. The guide had mentioned that there had been an epic battle here, and claimed that Sparkle 1 had been involved in it. It was all he could do not to correct her, or blurting out that he had been actually here on the day that it had happened. It was hard enough for him to be sober for once. He hadn't been in a long while. Finally, the little tour reached the cemetery. A big crater on one end of the area was protected by a force field. Candy Cane remembered all too well the explosion that had caused this, and the bloody legs that had lain on its edge. He had not taken a good look at it that day, but now he did. This was one other thing that did not fit with the story their guide was telling. Back then he had thought that the explosion had been caused by one of the shots the Slayers had been aiming at Frosty. Now he could see that the steel pipe in the crater showed signs of an outward explosion. That meant that the pipe had blown up under Frostmane's hooves. Their opponents had not gotten her. He had suspected that she might still be alive due to the absence of any gore except the two severed legs. And this here, dear fillies and gentlecolts, is where our best scientists still try to gain access to the facility the traitors used. They think that there might still be some technology down there that might be dangerous to our lands even now. Who knows, maybe there are even some of them still down there? Only time will tell. So far their attempts to break through this force field have not been met with success. But one day we will hopefully be able to expand our tour to the facility below, the guide said confidently. The group moved on while Candy and Mystique stayed behind. They had slipped out of the group just before they left the scene, slipping into one of the buildings. Immediately Mystique flew off through the ruins towards Godspeed's corpse, taking the sniper rifle that lay next to her dead friend. "I'm sorry, Speed. I will make sure you will get what you deserve when all this is over. Please forgive me for borrowing your beloved rifle," she whispered, checking the clip of the rifle, satisfied to see that it was still loaded. 15 years out in the open had done nothing to the enchanted rifle her friend had held so dear. In the pockets of what remained of her uniform, Mystique found 3 more clips. Godspeed's sidearm had not survived the years, and so Candy Cane would have to rely on the knife he had smuggled in if it came to a fight. They didn't think it likely, but there were changelings and griffins all over the place. The worst was that they couldn't even tell the changeling guards apart from the regular visitors. A few hours later. The sun had sunken below the horizon. It was still a mystery for the two Pegasi how the changelings did it, but they had somehow managed to take over the princess's tasks. They sneaked out of their hiding spot and towards the force field. Mystique and her group had succeeded in finding the elements of harmony. Rainbow Dash had hidden them in a sewer in Muzzleton, where she had been captured by her tormentors shortly after. It was only a shot in the blue, but they just had to try. Holding out the element of magic and the element of joy, the two Pegasi touched the force field, when several spotlights turned on them. As they looked up, they spotted several griffins and changelings on the rooftop of the chapel. They were caught. It just couldn't be that easy, could it? Mystique let herself fall to her belly, bringing the sniper rifle to bear. As she aimed for the head of the first griffin and pulled the trigger, the mare was surprised that there was no report. Instead, she just heard a click. The griffin began to laugh. "Did you really think we would leave an operational weapon just laying around? Do you really think we are that stupid?" The female predator laughed, barely able to keep her balance due to her laughter. The changeling's horns began to glow in a sickly green light, and the two freedom fighters knew that this was it. They might have been able to kill at least a few of their enemies if the distance between them hadn't been this great, but as it was, all they would be able to do was run for their lives. The first bolt of green magic flew towards the two, but it never hit its target. All Mystique saw was a dark blue blur that came from somewhere behind them. It grabbed the two Pegasi, jumped back into the crater with them and disappeared. As Mystique looked up at their winged savior, two green eyes looked back at her from a horned head.